Imagine this, a forest in the middle of winter, everything covered in snow, silence calm, a cold and still landscape, and right in the center, a small lit bonfire. That bonfire is you, your energy, your patience, your calm. But suddenly, someone appears. They're not cold. They don't want to warm up. They just want to kick the bonfire. They just want to see if they can put it out. They start to provoke you. They throw words, attitudes, disrespect at you, to see if you react, to see if you explode, to see if you lose control. And that's the problem. Most people react. They get angry, they shout, they get upset, and they end up losing control just where they shouldn't. They set fire to someone who isn't even worth looking at. But if you are wise, if you have a strategy, if you understand that every spark you spend must have a purpose, then you don't react as they expect. You respond with ice, with temperance, with intelligence. Because it's not about putting out the fire, it's about controlling it. In real life, this scene is repeated every day. In the office, on the street, in the family. People who provoke you just to get you out of your center. And if you're not prepared, you end up reacting exactly as they want, losing your composure, giving them your energy, and without realizing it, your power. But that ends today. This video is not a self-help message with nice phrases. It's a training for the mind. It's a direct strategy to confront and neutralize rude or disrespectful people without getting into arguments, without losing control, and without exhausting your energy. It's a way to set boundaries without shouting, without wearing yourself out, without letting anyone into your space if you don't allow it. And to achieve this, we're going to use STOIC philosophy. But not from the theoretical, but from the practical. From the everyday, from reality. 8 lessons that you can apply today. 8 ways to respond with intelligence, firmness, and presence. Because being a good person doesn't mean allowing people to walk all over you. It means knowing when to speak, when to be silent, when to step aside, and when to look someone directly in the eyes without saying a single word, but making it very clear that they can't mess with you. On Master Fire with Ice, some people are not interested in having a conversation. They are not looking for understanding, respect, or agreements. All they want is to provoke, irritate, get you out of your comfort zone. They throw a hurtful phrase at you, a gesture with contempt, a mockery disguised as a joke, and they wait. They wait for you to explode, to shout, to lose control. Because if you do, they win. They drag you into their territory, take you out of your center, and turn you into someone else. You become what they need, an altered, weak, emotionally overwhelmed version of you. And that's why the answer can't be fire. It can't be rage. It can't be a shout, a look full of fury, or an endless argument. You're not going to win by fighting on a field you didn't choose. The real strategy is to do what they least expect. Respond with ice, with firmness, with absolute control, because when you face a provocation without getting upset, without raising your voice, without letting the other person notice a single emotional movement, you create something that very few understand, an impregnable barrier. And that barrier is not seen, it is felt. The other person notices it. They realize that they can't touch you, that everything they said didn't move a single fiber in you. And there they start to falter because their strength depends on your reaction. If they don't get it, they sink into their own void. Mastering fire with ice is a decision. It's not weakness or indifference. It's a way of saying, you're not going to have power over me. It's looking calmly at the person trying to drag you into chaos and making it clear that you're not going to move an inch for something that doesn't deserve it. It's a form of silent authority that, far from being passive, commands respect. Most people react on impulse. Someone shouts at them and they shout louder. Someone throws an insult at them and they return another. It's an endless chain that only generates wear and tear, conflict and guilt. But you're not here for that. You're here to master yourself, to protect your energy, not to fall into the game of those who live provoking because they don't know how to build. And it's not about always staying silent, it's about choosing how and when to respond. Sometimes a word spoken calmly can have more impact than a speech full of rage. Sometimes silence is more uncomfortable than any argument. And many times the best response is none, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know that not everyone deserves a part of you. This is trained in everyday life, in that conversation where someone tries to make you look bad and you keep a calm gaze, in that argument where everyone gets upset and you decide not to escalate, in that moment when someone seeks attention through conflict and you simply don't feed it. Every time you choose ice over fire, you are building an inner strength that is not seen, but that everyone starts to respect. And yes, it may be that some accuse you of being cold, distant, or arrogant, that they say you should defend yourself more forcefully, that you can't let certain things go. But what they don't understand is that you are defending yourself, just not with shouts or explosions, but with mastery, with presence, with emotional intelligence that doesn't need approval, just results, because whoever knows how to master fire with ice doesn't need to shout to be heard or fight to win. They just need to stand firm while the rest burns out of control. 2. Don't explain what doesn't need defending. Imagine you're in the middle of a stadium filled with people. You're standing silently while around you people are shouting opinions about you. Some criticize you, others underestimate you, others mock you, and you, instead of responding, defending yourself, explaining every step you took, you simply walk towards the center of the field without looking at anyone, without saying a single word. You just move forward, with a steady head, clear gaze, and the calm of someone who doesn't need to convince anyone. The crowd falls silent. Not because you shouted louder, but because they understood that you have nothing to justify. That's the power of someone who doesn't unnecessarily defend themselves. Most people live with an absurd urgency to explain everything, as if every decision, every silence, every personal choice had to be approved by the rest. As if every malicious comment deserved a justification. But when you do that, what you're communicating is that you feel guilty, that you have something to prove, that the judgment of others affects you more than it should. And there lies the problem. A rude, manipulative, or disrespectful person knows this. That's why they throw out phrases designed to make you justify yourself. Passive-aggressive questions, criticisms disguised as advice, sarcastic comments like, "Why did you do that?" or "Don't you think you're making a mistake?" They don't say it to understand you, they say it to push you into their game, to make you explain yourself, to put you on the defensive, and start spending your energy proving you're right. But you don't have to do it. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves clarification. There are times when your silence is much stronger than any argument, because it shows that you are convinced of who you are, what you do, and why you do it. Not explaining what doesn't need defending is a sign of conviction. It's standing firm on your truth without needing to embellish it, justify it, or ask permission to live it. And yes, there will be those who say you're being proud, that you should clarify things, that it's better to speak so as not to be misunderstood. But if every time someone has an opinion you rush to explain yourself, then you're not living for yourself. You're living to soothe others' insecurities. Those who need to constantly explain themselves are seeking approval. Those who can remain silent without feeling guilty have found their center. This doesn't mean you should never speak. It means you should choose well when and why to do it. That you don't give your energy to those who come with the intention to manipulate rather than listen. It means you learn to detect when a question is genuine and when it's just bait. And in the latter case, have the strength not to bite. Because the truth doesn't need defending when it's firm, because there are things that explain themselves over time, and there are people who, even if you explain everything in detail, will never understand. And there lies freedom, in knowing that you didn't come into the world to convince, but to act coherently. So the next time someone questions you with ill intent, throws a provocation expecting you to justify yourself, remember this image. You, walking silently through the stadium, while the voices fade away on their own, not because you silenced them, but because you never gave them power. 3. Strike with words that close doors. There are times when it's not enough to ignore or keep calm. There are situations where rudeness, disrespect, or direct provocation requires a response. Not to engage in an argument, but to put things in their place, so that the other person understands, without a doubt, that they can't play games with you. And that response doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be shouted, it doesn't have to be aggressive. It just has to be clear, firm, and definitive. A single well-spoken sentence can slam a door so hard that the other person dares not cross it again. When someone disrespects you and you respond with evasiveness, unnecessary apologies, or soft explanations, you're leaving the door ajar. You're giving space for it to happen again. But if you use your words precisely, if you respond with a sentence that cuts the situation off at the root, you set an unbreakable limit. And that kind of limit doesn't need volume, it needs conviction. You don't have to insult, you don't have to humiliate, you don't have to demean yourself. You just need to say what's right, with the strength of someone who knows their worth and won't allow anyone to overlook it. Phrases like, "Don't ever talk to me like that again," "I don't accept that comment," or, "If you're going to address me, do it with respect," don't sound violent, they sound firm. They are phrases that don't seek to argue, they seek to close a door. And when a door is closed clearly, it avoids the wear and tear of having to defend what should already be evident. Many people are afraid to speak firmly because they confuse respect with submission. They believe that to be mature, you always have to speak softly, tolerate, be understanding. But there are people who don't understand that language. To those people, you speak with limits, with short phrases that don't open debate, because you're not looking to convince them or change their way of being. You're setting a barrier that says, "This is as far as you go, and from here I take charge." This requires presence. It requires that you don't tremble when you speak, that you don't lower your gaze, that you don't ask for permission with your tone. Because you're not asking if you can set limits, you're informing that you've set them. The difference is huge. And although it may be uncomfortable at first, although it may seem harsh, it's infinitely healthier than keeping silent and continuing to swallow what you don't deserve. Saying the right words at the right time doesn't make you hostile, it makes you clear. Respect is built from what you tolerate, but also from what you cut off at the root. And every time someone treats you badly and you allow it, you're sending the message that it's okay to do so. But when you respond firmly, without violence, without shouting, just with a direct sentence and no room for reply, you're teaching how they should treat you. Sometimes a single sentence can be enough to end a toxic dynamic. A sentence that doesn't open conversation, that doesn't seek revenge, that doesn't need explanation. It just cuts, it just stops, it just protects. That's the real strength, not to fight, but to say what's right so it doesn't happen again. Because sometimes silence is power, but other times the power is in speaking with surgical precision. And in that moment, when you throw that sentence and see how the other person is left dry, not knowing how to respond, you understand that it's not about arguing, it's about closing doors with words that don't need permission. 4. Smile, silence, and leave a mark. A lion does not respond to the barks of dogs. It walks, observes, and continues on its path. Not because it can't destroy, but because it knows it doesn't have to. Its presence says it all. That's the image you need to have in mind when you face people who try to provoke you, devalue you, or make you feel less. They don't need you to yell at them, to explain to them, or to return their disrespect with another one. What they need, even if they don't say it, is someone who doesn't break under their game. And what bothers them the most is a smile that doesn't break, a silence that doesn't yield, and an attitude that leaves a mark without the need for confrontation. The smile, the silence, and the mark are silent weapons. They don't hurt like an aggressive response, but they leave much deeper marks. When a rude person tries to get you out of your comfort zone and fails, they not only lose power, they expose themselves, because what starts out looking like strength in them turns into ridicule when you don't participate. That's the key. Your elegance destroys their theater. Smiling does not mean that you agree or that you are being nice. It's a gesture of dominance, a signal that says, "Nothing you do can touch me." A firm, subtle, serene smile shows that you have absolute control, that you know where you stand, and that you are not going to let anyone push you out of your place. That smile is ice disguised as calm. It's contained fire, it's quiet strength, and in many cases, it's worth more than any verbal response. Silence, on the other hand, is a barrier that prevents the other person's poison from reaching you. While they talk, while they throw hints, sarcasms, or provocations, you choose not to give them the validation of your reaction. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you understand that not everything deserves a response. Silence, when it is intentional, is not empty. It's a way to show that you already understood everything, that you don't need to say anything else, that what you had to demonstrate you already did with your presence, with your way of being, with your behavior. And when you combine that unflappable smile with conscious silence, you leave a mark. Not a superficial or flashy mark, but one that stays. Because the one who wanted to provoke you is left wondering why it didn't work. Because the one who tried to humiliate you ends up exposed to their own clumsiness. Because the one who wanted to get you out of your center ends up facing their own lack of control, while you remain firm, intact, at peace. This combination is not weakness or passivity. It's strategy, it's emotional maturity. It's proof that you are above the need to have the last word, above the automatic reaction, above the dirty game of those who don't know how to relate without attacking. Smile because it doesn't affect you. Silence because you don't need it. Leave a mark because you weren't part of the chaos, but you still made it clear that you were there. Just as the lion doesn't need to roar to command respect, you don't need to argue to make yourself respected. Your way of being, your way of looking, your ability to keep calm while everything around you is in disarray. That's what makes the difference. That's what is remembered. And often, what bothers a rude person the most is not what you say to them, but the fact that they didn't manage to upset you. They do feel that, and that even if they don't admit it, defeats them from within. 5. Withdraw as if nothing is worth it. An experienced fighter does not step into the ring every time they are provoked. Not because they can't fight, but because they know that not all fights are worth the wear and tear. They have learned that there are opponents who don't even deserve the warm-up, fights that only serve to dirty you, not to grow. And that's what many people still don't understand, that withdrawing is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's the greatest show of strength. When a rude or disrespectful person crosses a line and you decide to withdraw without shouting, without arguing, without even looking back, you are demonstrating something that most can't, that you don't need to win that battle because you already won by not allowing yourself to be dragged down. It's not about running away. It's not about avoiding conflict out of fear. It's about knowing how to choose. Understanding that your energy, your time, and your peace have such a high value that they cannot be wasted on someone who adds absolutely nothing. Most people stay in spaces where they don't feel respected just out of pride, to prove that they don't give up, to maintain an image. But you are not here to perform in front of the world. You are here to live with dignity, and withdrawing on time is also dignity. When someone insists on pushing you to the limit, provoking you, devaluing you, you can do something that cuts everything off at the root. Stand up, turn around, and leave, as if what happened was so irrelevant that it doesn't even deserve your attention. That hurts more than an argument, because it shows that that person did not have the power to affect you even a second longer than necessary. It's like closing a book that has nothing new to say. You don't throw it on the floor. You don't insult it. You don't burn it. You just close it and leave it behind because your story continues elsewhere. This kind of withdrawal is not done with words. It's done with decision, with absolute calm, without needing to explain, without giving warnings, without seeking understanding. It's done when you understand that any attempt to make the other understand no longer makes sense. Because there are people who don't want to understand, they just want to drag you down. And you, by simply stepping aside, make it clear to them that their attempt died before it even began. Withdrawing is also an act of intelligence. Not everything needs to be resolved. Not everything deserves your effort. If every time someone disrespects you, you decide to stay to correct, to debate, or to justify yourself, you will end up emotionally exhausted. There are times when you simply have to stand up, remain silent, and disappear from the space, from the conversation, or even from the life of the person who did not know how to value your presence. And that does not make you less brave. It makes you freer. Because true strength is not in resisting everything, but in knowing when to let go. There are places where your presence no longer makes sense, relationships where your voice is no longer heard, discussions where your intelligence is wasted. And there, the wisest thing you can do is withdraw with the coldness of someone who has already understood that what is in front is not worth the slightest effort. You don't need noise to leave. You don't need to make a drama. You just need clarity. Walk slowly without looking back, without resentment, but with a determination that speaks for you. Let the one left behind understand that your silence was the closure, and that there will be no return. 6. Wrap them in their own stupidity. There are traps that are not avoided by dodging them. They are deactivated by letting them fall under their own weight. And when someone rude, sarcastic, or provocative approaches with their childish attitude, you don't always need to respond or retreat. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to allow their own stupidity to expose them without you lifting a finger. Think of a person who enters a room shouting, believing that this is how they will impose themselves. They walk with false confidence, throw unnecessary comments, laugh at themselves as if they had the moral authority to laugh at others. Everyone watches them. Some hesitate to say anything. Others feel uncomfortable. But not you. You remain silent with a half smile, as if you were watching a poorly acted play. Because that's exactly what's happening. At that moment, the best response is not confrontation, it's exposure. You let that person sink into their own babble, reveal their desperate need for attention, let each of their words resonate in the air like a ridiculous echo. You don't need to attack, you just need to hold their gaze. Let them feel that they are being seen, not from fear or anger, but from the awareness of someone who already understood everything. When you don't react with anger or submission, when you simply let them speak, move, make a fool of themselves while you maintain your composure, you are wrapping them in their own weakness. You are giving them rope without rushing them. And in that rope, eventually, they get tangled up alone. This kind of strategy requires patience, not because you're waiting for a dramatic fall, but because you know that not everything is resolved with a response. There are times when the biggest blow is not a well-spoken phrase, but an absence of reaction that leaves the other dancing alone in their little circus. And if at some point you decide to intervene, you don't do it to correct them or to offend them, but to make them see that everyone has heard them, that everyone has seen them, and that they achieved nothing. With a brief and neutral phrase, you can finish closing the scene. Are you done? Was that all? Whenever you want to have a real conversation, I'm here. You don't say it to beat them. You say it so they realize that in your eyes, it wasn't even worth the effort to fight. Wrapping someone in their own stupidity is not to despise them, it's to return their attitude with a clean mirror, one where you can't put on makeup or pretend anything. And when that mirror is not shattered by your words, but remains firm due to your serenity, the other begins to feel uncomfortable, not with you, but with themselves. 7. Don't stoop down to the level of those who live in the mud. There are animals that only know how to crawl. They feel comfortable in the mud. They roll in it and feed on what others discard. Not because they can't get out, but because they learn to survive down there. And if you, who have walked with effort to stay clean, decide to stoop to their level, no matter how much you defend yourself or how much argument you have, you end up covered in the same dirt. The mud does not distinguish between who is right and who is not. It only stains those who dare to enter. In life, there are people who live emotionally and mentally in that same mud. They don't know how to communicate without shouting. They don't know how to have a conversation without attacking. They don't know how to relate without provoking. They are so accustomed to chaos that they make it their normality. And when you enter that game, no matter how much control you think you have, you lose, because you are on enemy ground, because you are playing by their rules, with their language, in a space where there is no honor or logic, only wear and tear. True strength is not in winning a dirty fight. It's in not fighting it, in not allowing someone to drag you into their emotional misery just because they have no other way to feel powerful. Because when you react, when you get upset, when you return each word with another just as sharp, all you do is show that it affected you, that you took seriously what didn't even deserve your attention. That's not bravery, it's loss. Loss of time, energy, control. And yes, there will be times when everything inside you will want to respond. You'll want to shout at that person exactly what you think. You'll want to put them in their place forcefully. You'll want to let out all the anger they're generating in you. But that's where your real power is measured. Not when you explode, but when you choose not to. When you can and don't want to. When you know that your silence has more impact than any insult. It's not about enduring everything. It's about knowing what's worth it. Understanding that there are arguments that don't seek to resolve anything, that only exist to drag you down, to dirty you, to steal your calm. And if you don't fall, if you don't enter, if you don't stoop, then you've already won. There are battles that are won by walking away without looking back. There are attacks that are neutralized with indifference. There are people who, if they don't find someone to fight with, collapse on their own, because they need opposition to feel alive. And you, by not giving it to them, cut off their oxygen. Remember this every time someone wants to provoke you, you walk above. And those who live in the mud can only look up from below as you walk away unscathed. 8. Make them hear their uncomfortable echo. Deep within a cave, everything you say comes back. If you speak forcefully, the echo responds with the same intensity. If you shout something absurd, that absurdity returns again and again, amplified by the void. And there are people who function the same way. They fill spaces with toxic comments, unnecessary sarcasm, veiled aggressions. They do it as if nobody notices, as if everything goes unpunished. But when you return their own noise to them without getting upset, without attacking them, just reflecting exactly what they said, then they hear their echo, and they get uncomfortable. Making them hear their uncomfortable echo means showing them their own behavior without adding a drop of anger. You don't distort it, you don't exaggerate it, you just return it as it is, with the calm of someone who no longer needs to defend themselves, just expose. Someone throws a passive-aggressive comment at you. You respond by repeating the essence of what they said, with the same neutral tone in which obvious things are said. Was that a joke? Do you always make that comment, or just today? Interesting what you just said. Very revealing. Nothing more. You don't insult them, you don't enter their logic. You just hold up the mirror. And that, for many, is unbearable, because they were used to nobody saying anything to them, to release their venom and carry on as if nothing happened. But when someone returns their own voice to them clearly, without emotional alteration, they feel it. And they don't feel it as an attack. They feel it as sudden shame, as if for the first time someone had turned on the light in a room where they could always hide. This type of response is not an open confrontation. It's a subtle strategy. It requires you to keep a firm tone, not to seek to hurt, not to put yourself above. You just reflect, you just echo. But that echo doesn't sound the same as their original voice. It sounds louder, more evident, more uncomfortable, because now everyone hears it, and there's no way to disguise it. You don't need grand speeches or lapidary phrases. Sometimes a simple repetition is enough. Sometimes you just need a prolonged look, a well-placed silence, or a question that forces them to think about what they just said. That's the victory. Not shouting louder, but making them hear themselves. When you do this, you're teaching something without preaching it. You're setting a boundary without raising a wall. You're saying, I saw you, I heard what you said, and I'm not going to react as you expected, but I'm also not going to ignore it. You're showing them that their games no longer work, that they can't play in the dark with you, because some people need to hear their own voice to understand what they're doing. And you, with your firmness, with your calm, with your capacity for reflection, give them that. Not to humiliate them, but to make them realize that they no longer have control. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment, I am Stoic, as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.